Elspeth von Draken leads the faction of Nuln, and she's all about gunpowder and war machines. She can upgrade these units to levels never seen before, as well as bringing a couple unique to herself. But how does all of this work in game? Let's dive into the faction and find out. And for the very first time, thanks to Creative Assembly for sponsoring this video. So first up, let's go through all the faction mechanics. She has the Imperial Authority bar at the top of her screen that can bring her faction buffs and debuffs depending on how much of the Empire lands are under Empire control, but she has no prestige or elect counts mechanics outside of this. That's just for Carl. If you want a full breakdown of the elect counts rework, then be sure to check out my Empire rework video. To keep things short though, you just need to make sure that Empire's borders are secure and isn't being wiped from the map. If you do that, you should be fine, and maybe pick up some nice bonuses along the way. Now, onto her unique mechanics. First up, we have the Imperial Gunnery School. This allows you to upgrade gunnery and artillery units in exchange for schematics. These are earned from dealing damage with these types of units in battle, as well as certain buildings and raising settlements. This means manually battling to use them as much as you possibly can is the best way to make sure you're swimming in schematics. Each unit type has 3 upgrades, and you can see what units they will affect on the right hand side of the screen. These upgrades are all permanent, so you don't need to worry about continually triggering them to have enhanced units. They're a mix of stat bonuses alongside some more exciting changes like changing ammo types or unlocking new abilities for your units. I wouldn't say anything here is as overpowered or crazy as Ickett's Workshop, aka unlimited ammo rattling guns, but it's as close as you can get without playing as a rat. Some of these also require upgrades to be made to the school before they become available. To upgrade the armory to high levels, you need to complete various tasks shown by hovering over the tiers in the top left, and each upgrade unlocks you higher tier upgrades for your Imperial armory, as well as some unique upgrades to each tier. To complete tier 1, you need to maintain 3 handgun units, build the tier 2 shooting range, and perform 3 gunnery school upgrades. And completing this tier also reduces the recruitment cost for gunnery units. To complete tier 2, you need to kill 1500 enemies with gunnery school units, build the tier 3 foundry building, and perform 5 more gunnery school upgrades. Completing this tier unlocks the Amethyst Armory, which I'll come to shortly, as well as unlocking a couple of units and an ability inside of this armory. To complete tier 3, you need to kill 1000 enemies with Amethyst units, maintain 3 Amethyst Ironsides, and use the Boona Bombard ability. Completing this tier unlocks more Amethyst units and increases the recruit rank of all gunnery units. And finally, to complete tier 4, you need to build the tier 5 Nuln Gunnery School building, upgrade in the Gunnery School 7 times, and use the Spirit Barrage Amethyst Artillery ability. And completing this tier unlocks you the final Amethyst unit, the Amethyst Artillery ability the Purple Eclipse, and reduces upkeep for all gunnery units. As mentioned, the Amethyst Armory is the second part of this mechanic. From here, you can unlock unique units for recruitment in your armies, upgrade them similar to normal gunnery units, and unlock powerful abilities to use in battle. Amethyst units are simply upgraded versions of existing units with some upgraded stats and different abilities. The Amethyst Ironsides gain a big increase to armor, as well as small ones to leadership, defense, and charge bonus, as well as gaining magical damage, and they also cause fear. The Amethyst Outriders gain a big increase to almost every stat but speed and weapon strength, a small decrease to ammo and a bit less range. Still, you wouldn't use them in melee, but the range damage is still much improved even with less range. Add on the magical damage and nothing can stop them. And lastly, they can also cause fear and terror for some reason. The Amethyst Hellstorm rocket battery is the same in every way, but halves the missile strength to gain vortex rockets that explode into a mini purple Son of Xerius, dealing damage in a large area, so it about evens out. And finally, the Amethyst Landship gains magical damage and causes terror. The upgrades to these units are similar to the Imperial Armory upgrades, but only affect each of these individual unit types, so you want to make sure you're making use of lots of them to get value, since both the units themselves and the upgrades can cost a lot of schematics. Lastly, the Amethyst Artillery abilities are simply abilities you can use in battle, and from this menu, spend schematics to unlock more uses. Boona's Bombard is an armor-piercing bombardment in a largish area, Spirit Barrage is a very high damage bombardment in a very small targeted area, and the Purple Eclipse is an extremely high damage single bombardment that doesn't really work. Elspeth's other mechanic is the Gardens of More. In any friendly or neutral owned settlement known to your faction, you can instantly build a Garden of More with a limit of 5 total on the map. And don't worry, if you realize you don't want one in a certain location or just need to free up capacity, they can be deconstructed from the building menu for a partial refund. Once completed, you can instantly teleport her army to any selected garden to travel across the map without any matching needed. As well as this, the Black Tower buildings grant her bonuses in the region like immunity to trespassing and replenishment, even if you're not in friendly territory. As well as this, you can also build in these gardens similar to the Undercities mechanic from the Skaven. You only have 1 slot and the choice of 3 buildings. The Amethyst College focuses on magic and wizards, the Temple of More focuses on the Knights of More stats, troops, and countering undead, and the Militia of More is more focused on army maintenance and recruitment. And aside from this, she also has her baseline faction effects. She gains an increase to research rate, reduced upkeep for gunnery units, and double XP gain for artillery and gunnery units. Of her own army, she grants immunity to vampiric attrition, as well as a reduced cooldown for the Law of Death. As for her faction's starting location and expansion, she starts in Nuln, warring with some vampires that go all the way south to Fyldorf. The short victory conditions require you to upgrade the gunnery school to tier 3 and destroy Sylvania and the Fecundites, aka Vlad and Festus. Once you've got rid of the vampires, there's also some nearby greenskins which can take out to complete Solund and take Fort Sol, giving you a fortified entrance into your lands. After this, Vlad will likely have been expanding into Aveland and Stirland, so makes for an easy third war. This will likely take some time with all of his territory and the vampire tendency to never stay dead for long. My best advice would be to take out their armies where possible and totally wipe them from the map when you do. If you leave them alive, vampires will raise dead and be right back in a full stack in no time, which is endlessly annoying. So wipe them out will ensure they at least have to recruit a new lord before pulling this trick. Also, halfway through doing this war for me, Scrag decided he also wants to attack, so be sure to fortify the south and maybe send an army down to see him off if you want to avoid dealing with him later. Once Vlad is wiped out and your southern border is secure, it's time to send a couple of armies north to take on Festus. In my game, he was pretty much pushed back to the Brass Keep, so this was easy enough, but your game may vary, so be ready with a couple of armies to wipe him out completely. Moving over to the battle side of things now, of course, we have a bunch of new units. First up, we have Elspeth von Draken herself. As you might have guessed, she comes with the Law of Death, and she's actually pretty decent in melee. She has mid-melee stats and high armor-piercing magical damage. Also, obviously, that Law of Death is not the best law in the entire game, but it has a couple of good picks, plus she can use it for pretty cheap, with very low cooldowns, which makes it a bit more attractive. Just get her in the front lines, but avoid her taking too much damage since she's not the tankiest person in the entire game. She also comes with the choice of 2 mounts. She has the Barded Warhorse, which gives her a bit more speed and charge bonus and armor. Still, she wants to be used exactly the same, but now will be more careful of getting surrounded in melee with the bigger hitbox. But you can get the spell spot wherever needed with that high speed now, so it's all good. And lastly, she has the Carmine Dragon. This is obviously super fast and flying, and it boosts every stat including attack and weapon strength. But you do come with a massive hitbox, so watch out for ranged. As of all dragons, she gains a breath ability, so be sure to use this on cooldown to get as much damage as you can onto whatever you fancy. And in this form, she's a great frontlines lord as well as being a strong caster. Of course, she's vulnerable to ranged and being completely surrounded in melee, so keep an eye out for that, and she should be just fine. As for her skill tree, she has a pretty standard bottom 3 rows, then she has her unique Unsettling Radiance line. This enhances her magic, counters healers in battle, reduces the cost of gunnery units, increases engineer capacity, enhances hers and her army's healing, massively reduces the cost of the purple Son of Azeri spell, making it slightly more worth the cost, and the top row unlocks 3 banners to her faction that come with some powerful effects to whoever ends up holding them. Next up, we have our legendary hero for the Empire, Theodore Bruckner. This guy is a very strong fighter. He has great melee stats and high non-armor piercing damage, as well as being extremely tough with high armor and high leadership. You want to get this guy on the front lines, fighting against the lowest armor that you can, and just providing leadership buffs to the rest of your army whilst doing a bit of damage. He just has the one mounting option, the Reaper. This grants him more speed with a slight drop to melee stats, but more armor and charge bonus, as well as much more armor piercing damage. To keep things short, this is just an upgrade all around. Just watch out for ranged and being surrounded with the larger hitbox. As for the skill tree, this guy is very similar to an Empire Captain, but he has his unique Savage Soldier line. This makes him into a beast in combat with massive damage, powerful abilities, and being nearly unkillable. He can even execute enemy units when they drop below 20% HP, so he's an extremely powerful combatant that you want on the front lines at all times. Next up, we have our new Empire Lords, the Master Engineers. These are a ranged support-focused lord. They have mid-melee stats and lower non-armor piercing weapon strength. However, they do have medium range, higher explosive non-armor piercing missile strength. These are great versus clumps of less armored enemies, since their explosive shots can deal massive damage in an area. They can also pick up several abilities, which make them extremely good at placing near or over ranged units for all kinds of buffs. As for their mounting options, we have 3 choices. The Barded Warhorse grants more speed, charge bonus and ammo. Still, use them the exact same and use that speed to keep them safe from melee, as well as getting into good firing positions. I wouldn't use them for charging combat unless absolutely necessary, since their range damage is so much better, as well as safer. We also have the new Mechanical Steed mount. This is slower than the Warhorse, but more charge bonus and armor. Still use them the exact same, but now they're tougher. If you have to do some charging, then at least they'll hit harder and be a bit tough to take down. But still, I'd avoid it if you can. And lastly, they have the Steam Tank. This is a little slower than the Steed, but you're in a damn tank. This has the exact same stats as the base Steam Tank unit, but you also have all of your Lord skills and abilities. So use it just like a Steam Tank, or put in some little Lord twists in there. Long range artillery that can also charge through enemies with ease, super tanky, just don't get hit in the back, and try not to get pinned down if you go into melee, and you should be just fine. And try to keep it near your ranged units for all those buffs. As for the skill tree, he has a pretty standard bottom 3 rows, and then he has 2 unique lines to choose from. Cartography Innovations is more campaign focused with upgrades for movement range, gunnery unit buffs, and some abilities to use in combat to buff allied units, whereas Pigeon Bomb Line has a few more selfish upgrades like abilities, stat improvements, and toggleable firebomb grenade launchers. And lastly, Endless Tinkerer on the top row increases faction research rates and reduces global recruitment time for gunnery units, so it's well worth picking up on every lord. And our last lord/hero, we have the new Engineer heroes. These are very similar to Masters, but swap the grenade launcher for a long rifle. This gains them more range, ammo, and armor piercing damage, but no explosive. This makes them much better versus single key targets with the high focus damage. They're still very mid in melee, so keep them at a range if at all possible. They also come with 2 mounting options. Barded Warhorse, same as the Lord, faster and more charge. And same as the Lord, don't change how you use them, just use the speed to keep them safe and get in firing positions. And they also have the Mechanical Steed. Same as the Lord again, slower and more charge and tougher. Same as the Lord again, don't change how you use them, just keep them firing and enjoy the added toughness and of course the style points. As for their skill tree, they are very focused on armor use. The bottom row has mostly less useful action, so keeping them battling is a much better use of their time. The survivalist line is all about enhancing their damage with a focus on ranged, meaning their melee never really gets better, which is just fine. Master of the ballistics line is all about buffing ranged units and the armor with auras, passives, and a couple of abilities for himself. At the end of the line, he unlocks the ability to switch between long-range armor piercing and short-range explosive shots. The first of the new units is the Hochland Long Rifles. These have a much longer range than handgunners, in fact massive sniper class range. They still have straight line of sight shooting, but now they come with double the armor piercing damage of handgunners. Keep them well back with an angle on key armored targets on the enemy side, and focus down large threats first and make sure they can always see something to shoot at. If they haven't got an angle, get them one. High ground really works wonders for these guys, since they can use that straight line of sight to shoot over your unit's heads, but if they're directly behind, they're definitely going to struggle. Next up, the Null Ironsides. These have the same range as handgunners, so medium range, and of course a straight firing arc. Aside from that, it's improvements to every stat but speed. Most importantly, doubling missile strength. The missiles actually deal the same amount of damage per shot, but the fire rate is almost doubled, meaning they'll be loosing volleys at a rate that few units can put up with for long. Pick a target to focus, and it'll go down fast. Of course, they need line of sight, so large units or getting angles are your only options. Just keep an eye on their ammo to make sure they don't burn through everything on weak units, since with a fire rate like this, it won't take too long. They also have the Black Powder Discipline passive, increasing their range and reload speed, meaning they turn into long-range machine guns once they get set up. Just pick them a target and watch them go to work. Next up, we have the Knights of the Black Rose. In the Empire Cavalry roster, these are most similar to Reichsguard. They have much less charge bonus, but much improved melee stats, especially defense. They're a good sustained melee cav, but have more of a focus on being tanky than dealing a lot of damage. Lower attack and low AP damage makes them quite slow to kill anything tough. They could be used as a replacement front line if you want high defense or to keep enemy units busy on the flanks, but if you want either charge damage or sustained combat damage, look elsewhere. They're not a bad unit, they're just not a high damage unit. Next we have the Landship. This is basically a much faster moving artillery piece. It's somewhere between a cannon and a hail blaster in terms of range damage. It has high range and ammo as well as good speed and a massive charge bonus, so can be used to charge into enemies. Melee stats are low however, so avoid keeping it in combat, especially with that large hitbox. Also avoid enemy ranged as it's a very easy target to focus. It can also fire on the move, so be sure to charge in and out of enemies, allowing it to fire at will the whole time for double the damage value. Or just use the speed to get a good angle and fire at your leisure. And lastly, we have the Steam Tank Volley Gun. Just the same as the old Steam Tank, but swaps less range for much more armor piercing damage. It still has a decent range, and the enhanced damage here is just crazy. Get it an angle on high threats on the enemy side and fire away. Alongside this, it can also charge with good bonus and weapon strength. Similar to the Landship, it can be used to charge and fire on the move, or just to get an angle and fire at will. Either way, don't let it get surrounded or focused from a range. Even with all that armor and a gold shield, focus fire will take it down eventually, especially if they're shooting in the back. And lastly, we come to our regiments of renown. We have Grundles, Defenders, Spearmen, which are of course a shielded spears unit. They gain the Rear Guardian passive ability, Expert Charge Defense, and Immunity to Psychology. The Hergig Jaeger Corps are a long rifles unit and gain increased armor, shield breaker missiles, and the Black Powder Discipline passive. And finally, the Wonder of the Age is a Landship and causes terror and gains the Encourage ability. So to wrap up Elspeth in a few short sentences, Elspeth is another lord that has a clear focus on what I would consider to be the best part of the Empire roster, or at least the most fun part. She's also fleshing it out with more units for the entire faction, as well as a couple that are unique to her armies. Her campaign is challenging with enemies in all directions, but this can serve you well to farm as many schematics as you need to upgrade all the units to the max and unlock those higher tiers of the gunnery school. While nothing has infinite ammo like the Ratlings, the mechanic is still full of fun upgrades to make units that are already good into must picks. And that's everything you need to know on how to get started with Elspeth von Draken in Warhammer 3. Let me know what you think of the Lord, and if you have any questions in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and if you want more Warhammer 3 DLC content, then check out this video on the rework for the other Empire factions.